Sadie was wrong. I'm keeping it short.
Huh?
I don't have a lot to say. The goal is to keep it short, yeah. And there's a reason for keeping it short today. So, the story, John 9, of the man born blind. I'll give you the quick summary in case we forgot in the last 10 minutes. Jesus and his disciples were walking around one day, and they saw a blind man. The disciples asked Jesus why he was blind. Was it God's punishment for his parents' sin or for his own future sin? Jesus says neither. He was born to give me an opportunity to teach you to stop asking stupid questions. He spat on the ground and he made mud. He put the mud in the man's eyes. He told him to go wash, and then the blind man could see. It wasn't a very spiritual thing. It's in our Bible, so we read it slowly and with respect, but it wasn't a very spiritual moment. It was a homeless man spitting in the ground and rubbing the mud in another homeless man's eyes. To top it off, he did it on the holy day when all work was supposed to be stopped. So it makes it even less holy a thing to do. Nothing about this was done properly. It was done casually. It was done almost disrespectfully. The Jews definitely thought it was disrespectful. Well, the Pharisees particularly. The Pharisees did not buy this. This was not a legitimate miracle in their eyes. It didn't count. The blind man was now technically clean. He was no longer defective. He could be part of the group now. When he was blind, he was not perfect. And if you weren't perfect physically, you couldn't be part of the synagogue. You couldn't be part of religious life. But now that he's healed, he should be included at the synagogue. Instead, they cast him out. They find a reason to cast him out. So, it's hard to imagine what it must have been like for the man born blind, but what do you think was more important to him? And I really don't have an answer. What was the biggest loss? Was it that he could not see, or that he was alienated from everyone else? What would be worse for you? It might be different for different people. Would it be worse not to be able to see, or to be excluded from society? The blind man was cured, even though he was cursed and he was outcast. And then the irony is that as soon as he ought to be welcomed in, he gets cast out again. Finally, the obstacle to being part of the group was removed, and then they kicked him out anyway. As soon as he learned to see, they showed him the door. So I'm going to try to make a bigger deal out of this story than is typically made out of it. I want to make this story an illustration of what all of Christianity ought to be about. It ought to be about healing and restoration. Maybe you are able to give sight to the blind. Maybe you went to medical school and you know how to do that. Maybe you can make the lame walk. Maybe you know how to feed thousands. That's wonderful. Maybe you don't know how to do those things. But the central miracle in the story was not that the blind man was able to see. The central miracle in the story was that Jesus got an impure person into the community. That was the miracle. He did it through a blind man. But the man didn't have to be blind. It could have been a myriad of other things. You and I can both work that miracle. We can all do that. Even if we can't heal blind eyes, we can supply the richer nourishment. We can supply the richer healing. We can restore the dead to life. We can bring people who were cast out back inside. We are able to do that miracle. The most amazing display of power in the story is not the physical healing. The most amazing display of power is that Jesus chose to care for this subhuman, dirty, worthless blind man. Jesus managed to see the guy and care about him. That was a miracle. According to everyone around, this man was trash. The cultural protocol placed him on the outside, along with the garbage and the animals and the women and the Gentiles. All those people we don't care about. He was worthless. He didn't have any standing in society. The amazing display of power comes when Jesus shows him that he's able to look at this man and see more than trash. He sees more than sin. He sees more than God's curse. He sees something valuable. So the question for us is, are we able to work that miracle? You don't need superpowers. No radioactive spider needs to bite you. You can do this miracle if you just, I don't know, you have to do some inner work, but you can do this miracle. And this is the central miracle of the story. Are you able to go to an overpass or a prison or a nursing home and see with eyes that Jesus has already opened? Can you look at people that you hate? Think about, who is it that you hate? Who do you refuse to give any patience to? Who's the other? Who is outside? Who does not belong in this place with us? Can we see past our usual prejudices and find someone who's just like us, actually? Can we realize that everyone out there, even if they're outsiders, everyone is a child who knows trouble and grew up and never quite recovered from it? That's all of our stories. We're all like that. The blind man found himself excluded even after the miracle. Healed or not, restored or not, the Pharisees interrogated him and his parents. The formerly blind man learns to see who they really are. I mean, he can see the physical things in the world, but now he can actually, now that he's being interrogated, he can see them for who they are. They aren't just trying to obey the law. They're being bullies. They want to be in charge. They want to be the ones deciding who is good enough. They love the law because it gives them power and respect. We could probably fill that role pretty easily too. We could work the miracle of Jesus. We could probably be the bullies who cast people out. We have a choice. We could pick either one. We could love the law because it gives us power and respect. It lets us kick people out. The blind man, was probably stung by their rejection. But at the same time, I can't really imagine him wanting their approval anymore. He's seen through their outside. He's seen that they're really just bullies. I don't think he would want to be part of their group anymore. It's the Pharisees who deserve our pity. At the end of the story, Jesus says that they are the blind ones, not this blind man. The Pharisees are the ones that deserve our pity. Oh, poor Pharisees. They're so small and weak because they can't even see. Their willful blindness is worse than his physical blindness ever was. Because they refuse to acknowledge his full humanity, they refuse to acknowledge their own. It's not long before he stops trying to make them understand. They push him and push him and push him, and then finally he gives them this sarcastic remark. It ends the interrogation. It gives them a good reason to finally formalize his excommunication. He's done with their nonsense. He says, I don't know. One thing I do know is that I was blind and now I see. I've told you already and you don't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? He's just done with it. He's no longer willing to cast pearls before swine. So, the whole story overall, Jesus heals and removes barriers to social belonging. But the in crowd refuses to acknowledge this change. So the usual standards of social belonging turn out to be small and pathetic. Jesus overcame these borders, these walls. And people who still try to fight for him are just sad. They're blind, and we need to have pity for them. I said I wanted to make a big deal out of this. I want to say that is salvation. That is salvation. I believe in the resurrection of the dead. I believe in heaven. But I want to draw our attention to this point right here. When Jesus removed the barriers to social belonging, he enacted salvation in their presence. I want to use the big word. Salvation for that. Why did Jesus come and die and rise again? Why did he copy the story of the blind man in his own life? You realize that's what he did. The gospel writer is telling the story of the blind man to get us, he told the story of John the Baptist, and now the blind man. He's getting us ready for the story of Jesus. They're all copying each other. They're people who are cast out, even though they ought to be included. Why did Jesus show us his resurrection only in the midst of his rejection and his suffering? Why was the happy ending in the middle of all this terribleness? I don't think it's so we could watch God the Father vent his misplaced anger on an innocent child. I think that's a pretty terrible image of God. I think instead, Jesus is showing us that salvation happens in the midst of death. In the midst of death. We need to have a good idea of what we're getting into if we're going to accept Jesus' salvation. It's not something that's going to make us necessarily very popular. Death and salvation usually go together. Healing and restoration don't fit our world. Some weird reason we don't like to see. We say we like to see the underdogs win, but when it really happens, I don't know. I don't see a lot of people longing for the days when we can include Muslims and Arabs in normal American society. No one dreams about that. They just dream about killing the bad guys, right? We're not looking for the underdogs to win. We're looking to exclude them more. Maybe it's a basketball game you root for the underdog, but that doesn't affect your real life. I don't think healing and restoration still fit our world. I don't think we like to see victims get healed. I think we like to push them down because it makes us feel better. There's something good about being a bully. I feel good about myself when I push someone else out. I can confirm to myself that I'm still safely inside if I have the right to push other people out. So oftentimes we don't react peacefully when the people of God restore the lost and bind up the broken. That's kind of a threatening proposition. Our normal boundaries get blurred, and we get nervous by that. Salvation is kind of an arms race. If you insist on fighting injustice, you should probably expect injustice to fight back. I don't know if Oscar Romero knew what he's getting himself into, but yeah, when you stand up for justice, injustice will just up the ante back on you. You can heal blind men all you like, but don't expect them to be welcomed back into the family. Your salvation will be met with further obstacles, both the internal obstacles and the external. Life-giving will be met with violence. You know, the story of the blind man, it's not all happy ending, right? Yeah, he was healed, but he also was excluded. You know, Jesus' miracle was only sort of effective, right? Did Jesus succeed in including this man? Kind of, not really. Is it a happy ending? Is this all good news? It seems to have been good enough news for the man who was born blind. He seems to be happy at the end of it all. On one hand, you could see that, this is just tragic irony. Just as he's allowed to enter society, the door gets slammed shut in his face. That's one way to look at the story. On the other hand, you could see it as a win-win for the blind man. Not only did he gain his sight, but now he knew who his friends were. He no longer was fooled into seeing the Pharisees as good, holy men. They weren't. The door is now open for him to go find people to associate with who are not hypocrites. He could find true relationships, and build something meaningful of his life. Jesus takes it one step further in his own story. Jesus experiences the rejection, but then he demonstrates that we have a reason to hope even beyond death. So, I'm trying to drive this point home. I don't know if I'm doing a good job, but this point of healing and restoration of the underdogs, healing of the victims. That is central to Christianity. But not far behind it is this idea that it's not going to work out great every time. As we include more victims, as we fight for more justice, we're going to be met with even greater challenges. It's a back and forth. I'm saying this because it's hard to find time for new membership meetings, and that's what we're supposed to be doing this time of year. We had one last night. Was it last night? It was 2 nights ago. We had family in town. Like, timeline is all blurred. Yeah, 2 nights ago we had a new membership meeting, and I didn't know if it would happen when I was writing this, so I thought that it'd be good to have a new membership meeting right now in church since I got people together. I have a captive audience. The idea was going to be 3 sessions. I was going to start talking about what it means to be Christian, and then we'd talk about what it means to be Anabaptist or Mennonite, and then lastly we'd talk about what it means to be a member at this particular church. But I just gave you one version of what Christianity might be. I think it means being healed, being given new eyes to see people differently, and then accepting the consequences, acting upon this new information. But I'm not the whole church. Other people have different angles. So I'm going to stop the sermon. This is on page 3. Normally I go to page 5 or 6. So I'm done. For the rest of us, what does it mean, or what should it mean, to be Christian?